You're listening to Odlar Yurdu Radio from Vancouver. Every year, in May 22nd, members of Azerbaijani community in Iran commemorate the event they call cartoon incidents. 4 years ago, in May 12th, Iranian State newspaper published a cartoon depicting Azerbaijani living in the country as cockroaches. It showed an Azerbaijani speaking cockroach and suggested people deny it food until it learned to speak Persian. Soon, demonstrations spread over the northern cities of Iran. By May 22nd, hundreds of thousands of Azerbaijanis went on the streets demanding an official apology. Shouting slogans such as Azerbaijan is awake and ready to protect its language. Turkish language is the language of the dignity, and long live Azerbaijan. The demonstrators marched on the streets of Tabriz. The demonstrations were met by force and many people were killed and arrested by the authorities. Today we're going to present an interview with Fakhteh Zamani. She's the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Association for Defense of Azerbaijani Political Prisoners in Iran, the organization that promotes rights of Azerbaijani minorities living in Iran.
This is Azerbaijani Odlar Yurdu Radio, 102.7 FM CFRO Vancouver Co-op radio station.
Good afternoon, Fakhteh. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. You are the founder and Chief Executive Officer of Association for Defense of Azerbaijani Political Prisoners in Iran. We call it ADAP. So first, tell us about ADAP. Why and when did you decide to create ADAP? What was the need?
ADAP is a human rights group based in Vancouver, which has a mandate to bring awareness to the situation of Azerbaijanis in Iran, and also try to help with individual cases, and as well as organize groups all over the world to help us with our goal. The reason I started starting a human rights group which specifically would target situation of Azerbaijanis in Iran was when we had mass demonstrations in Azerbaijani region in Iran, and in May 2006, and upon my not just me, but our Azerbaijani community outside the country contacting Iranian human rights groups, we were unable to pursue them to do anything regarding the situation at that time. And seeing that we were not successful with even though the situation was very bad, but we were not successful with convincing them to do anything.
Convincing whom?
All the human rights groups that and groups that they had, Iranian researchers or workers. So we realized that we have to have a group that specifically helps Azerbaijanis. So May 2006 was when we decided to start this group, and it was in November of the same year, 2006. It was registered in British Columbia.
Okay. So you just mentioned that it was in response to the events in May, which is the cartoon incidents that we're going to talk about today. Is it right?
Yes.
Okay. Then tell us about more about cartoon incident. What happened?
Iranian newspaper. It was a government-run newspaper called Iran published a cartoon which depicted an Azerbaijani as a cockroach, and a Persian kid was speaking to this cockroach, but there was no communication, and they were following that cartoon. There were 10 ways of exterminating all these cockroaches that they called, which was some of them very insulting, but overall it was very shocking to Azerbaijanis in Iran to see such a large page in a government-run newspaper, because all the newspapers, as some people know, that in Iran they are checked thoroughly for anything that would be insulting to government or to the leader, or anything that is not approved by Islamic rules. But somehow this one full-page cartoon with all these 10 sections of how to kill cockroaches was able to get past that censorship and was published and distributed all over the country.
So the cockroach was Azerbaijani?
Yes, was speaking Azerbaijani.
And why do you think is that? What was the intention? Did they intentionally try to insult Azerbaijanis, or was there any explanation given to it?
This why goes back to almost 80 years of racism and discrimination, and Azerbaijanis being targeted and called different names and dehumanized by many ways. This is not the first time that what it was done. Calling an Azerbaijani a donkey, in so many jokes that is easily can be found, hundreds of them, and now on internet, if someone in Persian types in donkey Turk, which Azerbaijanis are Turkish speaking group, but this was not the first time, but also the reason for this was probably to bring something new to put into the society that would be a tool for normal individuals daily to use to insult Azerbaijanis, in which they are all over the country now, and they, especially in Tehran, there could be more than 1/3 of the population are Azerbaijanis.
But you say that that was kind of dehumanizing Azerbaijanis in Iran. Do you see a resemblance to the other events? For example, I know that in Rwanda in 1994, that was calling someone as cockroach was used by the certain groups to dehumanize other group for kind of justifying the mass killing. Is there anything like that, or it was a completely different incident?
Azerbaijanis are, as a human being, are culturally and linguistically and socially, from every aspect of life, they are massacred for 80 years. At schools, they are at school books. They are. You can see many parts of the history books which puts down Azerbaijani Turks. You go to media daily; they are using jokes and insults and always showing Azerbaijanis as backward, while they are not. They are. I will explain later that how active and how productive and how they are the Azerbaijanis are a very important part of Iranian society. But reality is one thing. But this is used daily. This is not the first time. But what was new for people to see that was that cartoon intentionally in those 10 ways of killing Azerbaijanis put some emphasis on stereotypes that are used daily by people. So that could, you said if it was intentional. I, as an independent thinker, I picked up the cartoon and read it thoroughly to make sure that it is not something that could be a misunderstanding. But then going through the whole article, you could see that it was done intentionally. So going back to the question if this was intentionally done to start dehumanizing and proceeding to go towards like massacre and those things, I think they have for the last 80 years, we can say like in 1946, after Azerbaijani region was declared an autonomous region, and following that, when the Iranian government attacked to take over it, there were like thousands of people were killed in very few days, 2-3 days.
And killed by whom?
By Iranian government and army. So that was, it has already happened to Azerbaijanis. And now following that, following 1946 takeover, so as we said, the language was banned and cultural events were banned, and many people were afraid even to mention that their ethnicity.
I'm gonna take a little bit different direction. I did some research and background, and there are lots of materials, especially government, state materials, telling that Azerbaijanis are well integrated into Iranian society. They're having the key positions in Iranian society, and they are the part of the culture, and they're the part of the society. Is it true?
Yes, I was saying that on one hand they are insulting Azerbaijan to call them donkeys and cockroaches. On the other hand, Azerbaijanis have very important positions in government, but they are very active in scientific communities all over the country. They are one of the most hard-working people that you can find in Iran, and no one can deny that. They are, but in the position of power, anyone who is in that position, they would not be able to even mention that they are Azerbaijani, or yet to bring attention to their ethnicity. As long as you assimilate and you pass and you do not defend your culture and your language and you speak Persian, you can have any position in Iranian power system. But rest of the people, no, they are discriminated. They are, if they do not speak the language fluently, they are made fun of. Even children are not immune to this, and it goes on and on. But the Azerbaijanis in the last decades, they have been the biggest contributors to Persian literature and culture. Dr. Barahani is an example of that. They have brought many new, literally, they have changed the the Persian literature in the last couple of decades in Iran.
I'm just going to move to the next question. So, May 12th, this newsletter you just mentioned, Iranian State newsletter, which is scrutinized by the government, publicized this cartoon depicting Azerbaijanis as cockroaches. And 10 days later, May 22nd, demonstrations start in Tabriz and in other cities in northern Iran. My question is, what happened in between? There was like 10 days of time. What was the state reaction? Was there any government apology? Did they try to do anything in between those 10 days?
No, they did not. Usually, this goes back the way Azerbaijanis always ask for their rights and react to the situation. They usually try not to take a reactive position to be in that. But if they ask for their rights, they always write letters to government, they send requests, and they write petitions. This was done the same way. Mm-hmm. They initially, after seeing the cartoon, they wrote to the newspaper, they wrote to their local MPs, they wrote to Capitol, to the government, asking why this was done, and asking for explanation, and asking for apology or reaction from the government. Never asking for the arrest and imprisonment of the cartoonists or anything like that. Mm-hmm. There's no record of any request of repressing the freedom of speech, but asking for government to explain, since it was the government-owned newspaper. But there was nothing in between. Okay. Government did nothing. They ignored, and even they never mentioned. They took no action. And then following that, people, activists in the region, in every city basically, even smaller city, they organized demonstrations, and there was massive demonstration.
Mm-hmm. So, that was my actual next question. What happened on May 22nd?
On May 22nd, there were millions of people came out. There are pictures of all the demonstrations, and there were videotapes. There were millions of people came out very peacefully. It was a very, despite of you could see millions marching, but there were there were very little incidents. But and most of the slogans were about language rights and Azerbaijani rights, and still, as I mentioned, there was no mention of request for arrest of the journalists or anyone. But most of the slogans were about their rights. It was an opportunity for them to show the government that they are very upset over this humiliating cartoon, and also to show to have an opportunity to express their frustration with not having schools in their language and being discriminated all the time.
So, what was the government's immediate reaction? You say that millions of people came out, and which city it was? I guess Tabriz?
Tabriz, Ardabil, Zanjan, Urumiyeh, Khoymand, it goes on and on, Goshochai, everywhere. Any city, even small cities like Shia, which is a very small town. So there's not 1 or 2 or 10 cities that they had demonstration, almost in every city.
What was the immediate reaction from the government?
Government initially, at first they were not violent towards demonstrators, but
government wasn't
Yes, no, they were at the start. They because some of the local special forces that they use to control demonstrations, local special forces, they were not agreeing with those troops that they came from capital on how to control the crowd. Mm-hmm. But towards the end of the demonstrations, there was violence, and there were people in some cities like Suldus were killed, and there were some shots in the face with bullet spraying guns and blinded. We have one individual who is now living in Switzerland who lost both of his eyes due to this type of guns they were using to shoot people. And some were killed and some were arrested. There were many injured in the hospital. They were in hospitals, and following that, we had some deaths in custody. That those individuals who were taken from hospital to prisons, they lost their lives.
Mm-hmm. How long did demonstrations continue? Was it only May 22nd, or did it last longer than that?
Not all the cities came out at the same time, at the same day. So then there were a few days like that we had demonstration in different cities. It took around 1 week, and it was demonstrations were happening in different cities on different days.
What was the government late reaction? Did they issue apology? Did they? I heard that they closed the newspaper.
Yeah. Yes, later on they closed the newspaper, and they imprisoned the cartoonists for some time. They never apologized. No one received any apologies from government. But then it resulted in many Azerbaijanis dead and injured and in prison.
Do you know how many were killed and how many were in prison?
There were, we have the name of 10 people from different cities who were killed, but probably the number could go much higher, since most of the families who were contacted, and then they were ordered by special by the Ministry of Intelligence not to speak to anyone about their loved ones. But also we had at some point list of hundreds of people who were injured, and many following the demonstration they were arrested during the demonstrations, and they were sentenced to years, some of them years, like Abbas Husani said, years in prison for participating and organizing this demonstration.
Okay. What was the reaction of Ahmadinejad government in terms of how did he try to describe the situation?
They basically tried to ignore, and then at some point they were trying to say that these demonstrators came from other countries like Azerbaijan and Turkey, and then they changed their direction, saying that Azerbaijanis would never be following the directions of the foreign governments, or like trying to create ethnic tension. So the reaction was all over the place, from going from one day saying that they were not Iranians who were demonstrating, all the way going to saying that it was foreign powers were trying to create problem in the region.
Mm-hmm. What was the reaction from international organizations and the governments of the other countries?
At that time, Amnesty International was very receptive to trying to help Azerbaijanis. But other than that, also Azerbaijanis who were who are active for the rights of language and cultural rights of Azerbaijanis, they were not at that time able to really organize and bring attention to this. So it was basically did not get out in the international media, and most of the international organizations, they were not able to do much.
Mm-hmm. What about the Iranian media, the mainstream media in Iran?
Media inside the country is controlled by government, so they did not do much. But also Persian media like Voice of America and BBC and other Radio Farda, other media that was funded by foreign governments, they were not interested in bringing this issue to the news.
So it's been 3 years now. It's the third year anniversary of the events. How is the situation of the language and rights of Azerbaijanis in Iran?
Nothing has changed. Still, this is the same. The government is still arresting people who are asking for implementation of their constitution. Iranian constitution gives rights to Azerbaijanis and other ethnic minorities to have their own language schools and lessons in their language and have their media, but still nothing has changed. There is not a clear statistic of how many Azerbaijanis live in Iran, because none of the censuses are taken based on ethnicity, or language. So you can't say that you can't identify like an Iranian is from what ethnic background or what language. But there are estimates like between there are 25 to 30 million Azerbaijanis live in Iran.
And my last question for today, what about the other ethnic minorities in Iran? Are they having the same problems? Do they have to also fight for their cultural and language rights?
All the ethnic non-Persian ethnic groups in Iran, they deal with the same thing. Persian is the only language used in education, media, and in government offices. But there are other than Azerbaijanis, there are Kurds, Baluchis, Lurs, Turkmen. None of them have any, not even one class in their language. But some regions are they are struggling through armed groups and violence, but some regions like Azerbaijan is quite peaceful, and they're asking for their rights peacefully.
All right. Thank you very much for coming to talk to us, and I hope one day human rights will prevail all over the world, including Iran. I was wondering if you have any final comments.
Thank you for having me, and I wish you and Odlar Radio best of luck in this upcoming year.
Also try to contact Iranian Embassy in Ottawa to learn Iranian government's official position on the cartoon incident that happened 4 years ago in Iran. But we were not successful to obtain an official position from Iranian government.